don't get injured, stay flexible, stay healthy, make sure I can sit with a straight spine.
Yep.
And then anything else is a bonus, you know.
Welcome to the Fortified Project. I'm Tamas Finta. My guest today is Cameron Quinn, 6th Dan Shihan of Kyokushin Karate. What else do we have to know about you, Cameron? Please tell us more about yourself.
That's about it, really. I'm born and bred on the Gold Coast,
Yep.
so I grew up at Surfers Paradise. I went to school on the Gold Coast, and I started martial arts training in 1971, but until then I was a lifesaver, a nipper. So I guess I got my early days of training as a nipper, as a lifesaver, playing rugby league and everything. But once I started the martial arts, I kind of stuck to that.
Sure. How did that start? Because in your book I read how it started. I think it's quite fascinating how you met karate in your life.
Well, actually, you know, I have 4 older sisters, and in 1971 at one stage, my mum took there were only 2 martial arts schools on the Gold Coast back then. One was a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu school, and then my instructor, Frank Everett, opened up a Kyokushin dojo in 1971. And my mum wanted my sisters to go and get some self-defense lessons, and I just tagged along, and, you know, rather than stay at home, I said, yeah, I'll come. And the funny thing was, they were completely not interested. But I jumped in the back of the class and I started to train, and I was hooked straight away. So I started to go regularly then. But then in 1972, my dad got seconded with his work to go to Europe for 6 months. So I ended up going to boarding school. So I was at boarding school in Brisbane at St. Peter's College for 2 years. So during that time I didn't train much, funnily enough. A little bit here and there during school holidays, but you know, if I want to be really brutally honest, those 2 years were kind of almost a blank.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I came back after boarding school, I went into it again. I was really hungry to start training again. So I started training. Frank had 3 schools. He had one at Miami, one at Labrador, and one at Southport. So you could train somewhere 7 days a week.
Right.
So I was training 7 days a week. I was young. My body was growing, so I was itching to burn up energy. And I'd hitchhike up and down the Gold Coast to go to these different dojos. Mum and Dad, they started out by dropping me there, but in the end they just said enough's enough.
7 days too many.
Days is too much. So I used to hitchhike. And
Right.
most of the time it was other karate guys that had picked me up. They'd recognize me. But that's how it got started, really, right here on the Gold Coast.
Right. But you also had some experience training in Japan.
Yeah. In 1975, I met a Japanese boy. His name was Shuji Ozeki, and he was an exchange student. And I'd been, in grade 11, grade 12, I decided I wanted to go to Japan and train with Mas Oyama. It didn't really mean anything to me, and it was, when I say it didn't mean anything, Frank, my instructor, could have been from a different style of karate. It was just, you know, good luck or whatever that he was teaching Mas Oyama's style of Kyokushin. So I wanted to go to Japan and train with Mas Oyama. So I was working on the weekends as a porter in a hotel, doing room service deliveries and things like that, and trying to save my money. But, you know, I wasn't saving that much. I mean, I worked out, doesn't matter how much I save, I'm not going to be able to go and stay in Japan for very long. So I tried to think about a way that I could go to Japan and have someone else pay me to do it. And then I met the Japanese boy, Shuji, and he was an exchange student with Rotary International. And he said, well, how about you apply for a scholarship? So I applied for a Rotary Exchange scholarship, and I ended up getting that. So I was able to go and live in Japan I had my accommodation paid for, my education paid for, my food essentially paid for 1 year. So during that year, of course, the most important thing was to go and train with Mas Oyama. So every opportunity I had, I would go and train with him. And
Right.
it was a, 1976. It was an early time. There was no Japanese on the Gold Coast at this stage. Uh, in fact, the only tourism on the Gold Coast was from Victoria and Sydney. It still wasn't an international destination. So for someone to go to Japan as a 17-year-old and live there for a year and train in Japan was kind of unusual.
Yeah. Now, some of you guys might not know who Mas Oyama is. So can you just tell a bit more about Oyama? What the significance of training with Oyama? What it meant?
Sure. Well, Mas Oyama was a larger-than-life figure. He was one, although there were martial arts schools in America before Mas Oyama went there in the 50s, he was the one that essentially introduced karate in a big, big way to the world. He had schools all over the world, influenced largely by his incredible personality and his drive and his belief and power in karate. Some of the things that he could do in karate were quite incredible. In fact, quite often a lot of people say, well, it's not true. It can't be true. But, there's plenty of people around who were eyewitnesses, and I have spoken to a lot of people who are a generation or two before me and confirmed that, in fact, a lot of these stories, which seem too incredible to believe, were quite true.
That these stories must have had a huge impact on you, because if you don't mind me grabbing this book, you wrote this book.
Yes.
The Budo Karate of Mas Oyama. So how did this come about?
Well, I'd been to Japan, lived there. When I came back, besides all the other things I was doing, like going to university and things like that, I started teaching. And at some stage, my students started to ask me questions. Can we get a translation of the Japanese words, or what does this mean, or what does that mean? So I did a printout. I just did a few pages on terminology. And
Because you speak Japanese as well, right?
well, yeah, I studied Japanese
Yep.
in Japan
Yep.
when I was there, and also I did my degree in Japanese at University of Queensland. So my students were saying, well, can you give us a handout? So I wrote a handout, and then the next step was they said, can you explain the meaning of the names of the kata? And then that's where it started. So I thought, well, there's no point in stopping now. And I had gone back to Japan in 1979, trained for 4 months. I'd gone back in 1984, and I lived in as a live-in student of Mas Oyama for 3 months. And I kept a lot of notes because I thought, well, when I go back to Australia, I want to start my own live-in training program. So I kept a lot of notes. So a lot of the notes that I kept, I translated into the book. The book kind of introduced the connection between the martial arts origins and Indian yoga philosophy. Because whilst we recognize that many aspects of martial arts come from China, where did China get them? And many aspects of the Chinese martial arts, particularly the internal breathing systems and so on, all came from India.
Right.
So this book was really an amalgamation of the original traditional philosophies of Indian yoga and their connection to the martial arts. And then that then goes into the colored belt system and how you can use those ideas and concepts to improve your own training as you advance through the ranks.
I see. Now with thank you. With you emerging into martial arts practice, it's often said that martial arts is not just about the training, it's a way of life, it's a way of looking at the world, a way of looking at ourselves. So what did you find, what do you find was really significant in your life that came from martial arts? I mean, discipline, self-confidence, anything like that, that it carries over into other walks of life?
Yeah, all that. I mean, especially if you take your training seriously, you develop good habits. You develop habits of discipline.
I was hoping we get to that word, habits.
Yeah, and I think if you do train seriously and regularly, then what seems to be very normal for you is actually quite challenging for a lot of people. And you don't realize that till you step outside the dojo and you see how difficult some people find just to establish a regular training habit or just to establish certain behavioral habits. And one thing I think I find about martial arts is that, you know, when I was a little boy, we grew up with Sunday school and church school and going to church. And in terms of common Christian religions, it was far more common back 50, 60 years ago to be connected to church. And so church gave people certain core fundamentals, certain belief system, certain patterns of behavior, you know, treat others as you want to be treated and don't steal and don't, all this sort of stuff. But then over the years, the world has become more and more secular and people say, well, we don't need religion. Of course, with that has come all kinds of problems. The world's getting worse and worse in many respects. But I think the martial arts stepped in to fill a big void. Because the reality about religion is that if you look at the origin of the word religion, it comes from the Latin root religare, which means that which is necessary. So the fact of the matter is, even though some people see religion as the man with the collar in the pulpit giving a sermon about hellfire and brimstone and God as a wrathful God, the fact of the matter is real religion is what is most important to us. And so we all are seeking to feel a sense of peace. We all are seeking to feel a sense of joy. We all want to be free of pain and want. And that really is what all religions are. You get away from the cultural aspect, the historical aspect of different religions, because they all came in different places and different times. You strip that back, and what you're left with is a system of how to be happy, how to be peaceful, how to treat other people kindly. And martial arts fills that void for a lot of people. You walk into a dojo, you learn respect, you learn discipline, you learn how to treat other people kindly. You learn that by being a good training partner, everybody benefits. If you walk in and you're a dead set pain, nobody learns, no one wants to train with you. You go, okay, well, what did I do wrong there? So there's lessons go on through the martial arts all the time. And then there's the physical aspect of training, staying flexible, staying healthy. It doesn't mean you have to be the world triathlon champion, or you don't have to be a gold medalist. You can do that as well. But more important in life is developing a consistent habit of being healthy and being fit. Some people say if you don't have your health, you have nothing, but I don't believe that. I think health is very important, but I've met too many healthy people who aren't happy to know that there's no connection. Being healthy does not make you happy.
It's a good foundation.
It's a good start.
Yep.
You need that inner core, that spiritual stuff, if you like. So the martial arts gives you that fitness and health. Then it gives you technique. So it allows you to walk straight, stand up with good posture, pull your shoulder blades together. All these serve to make you, to give you a presence in society. So people don't want to pick on you.
Right.
And if they do, you have the technique to deal with it. Then it gives you the mental, spiritual side. It's interesting. In English, we say the mental side or the spiritual side. In Japanese, essentially, the word's one. There's no separation. Because the reality of true spiritual training is it's actually a mental thing. You have to deal with your mental habits and your mental issues. So the martial arts offers a whole range of those things. We have the dojo kun, which is on the wall, which is the training oath. And if there's 7 precepts in that, and if you were to just seriously take those precepts as an instruction for life, well, you have a religion right there. So I tend to find that the martial arts is like 3 legs on a chair. You have the physical, the spiritual, and the technical. And they all work together because they all support each other. And then if you look at the Mas Oyama had 11 mottos. He also had the dojo training oath. You combine those, you really have what could be regarded as a pseudo religion.
Right.
And that's, I think, the value of it, because I get kids walk into the dojo, or their parents bring them in, almost exasperated. I don't know what to do. And within just a couple of weeks, they're going, this is
What happened?
magic.
Yeah.
What's going on? I said, well, all it is
Yep.
you don't kowtow to your kids, and everything they want, you don't give it to them. You know, this whole notion of if there's a bully, don't do anything, go and tell your teacher.
Yeah.
That's just such a load of codswallop. So what you do is the kids come into the dojo, they learn that actually they can do something if they make an effort.
Yep.
And, you know, the transformation is quite incredible.
Now, obviously, you're still training yourself.
Yep.
How often do you practice or move and train?
Every day.
Every day. Yep.
Even sometimes on Sundays. I have my little program that I do at home.
Yep.
But
So you make time at home?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes I make more than other days. Generally speaking, I have a little program which I follow, which is not super intense,
Yep.
but it's challenging, and it lasts for about 1 hour. And on a good day, I'll do that full hour.
Yep.
Sometimes I won't have time, so I just have maybe 15 minutes of exercise. I try to do something every day. When I say try, I do. I pretty well do something every day. And then I'm in the dojo pretty well 6 days a week. But, you know, saying that, I remember back when I first opened my dojo, and the intensity at which we trained was quite amazing. It really was. Even when I think about it, and I still get people contact me after 30 years, and they say, you know what, I used to train in those days in the old dojo in Margaret Street, or in the Hangar Dojo in Brisbane. I had full-time dojos. And they were saying that since then they've travelled all over the world, trained with all kinds of people, and never once have they found a place that has that intensity. And that's something that I brought back from Japan, because you get used to a certain intensity, as you know. And, you know, now there's a lot of popular sayings on T-shirts and so on, but, you know, one of those funny ones you see now is, your workout is my warm-up, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Well, quite seriously, we would get guys come into the dojo and they had some notion that they were going to, you know, they didn't believe. A lot of kickboxers and things like that, if you wear a gi, they think you're soft.
Right.
So they'd come into the dojo and, you know, they'd have their wraps on and they'd have their singlet, and they're going to tear the dojo apart. And within an hour, they're begging for a rest. They can't even keep up from just what was literally our warm up.
Yeah.
And it would get like that, you know, when these guys would come in and they go, we want to train with you. And one of my students had come over and whispered, says, what do we do now? They didn't even pass the warm up, you know. Well, so you get used to a certain intensity.
Yeah.
Now, let's go forward. Now, that's 35, 40 years ago. Now I don't train anywhere near as much, because the objective then was to get fit, get hard, fight, win tournaments, this sort of thing. Now my objective is don't get injured.
Yep. So how old are you now, Cameron?
61.
61.
Don't get injured. Stay flexible. Stay healthy. Make sure I can sit with a straight spine.
Yep.
And then anything else is a bonus. You know, and if I can do some push-ups and sit-ups and squats and still do my kata and still train with the guys. And I love to get on the mat and roll around and wrestle with guys who are 30, 40 years younger. You know, so as long as I can still enjoy that, that's enough. What am I going to do? I'm not going to ever I think it's good to have competition because the Kyokushin style of competition where there's no padding, where it's bare fists, it's knockout, it's full contact. It really is important to develop that courage. You can't walk into those tournaments fearful. So you develop courage, you develop strength, your body gets resilient and tough and all that. Well, there's a time and place for that because there's lessons to be learned from that. But there's also a time and place to know when to retire and know when to take your life a little more gently physically and a little more seriously spiritually and psychologically and emotionally.
I've got a question for you because so it's all about our interview today, and this question just kept coming up in my mind this morning. If there was an advice you could give your 30-year-old self, like going back 30 years, what would it be?
Honestly, I don't think I'd change a thing. I think I stumbled upon a beautiful path. Actually, my yoga path and my martial arts path. I stumbled upon them as a teenager.
Right.
And I was very blessed. And it doesn't matter how I analyze life, I can't imagine anything different.
That must be a very good feeling.
I think probably I would have liked to get into the wrestling, grappling side of things much younger, but that didn't exist in Australia.
Yeah.
That's a European, North American thing. We have rugby league in Australia. We have footy. We have Aussie rules. We have rugby. We don't have the wrestling thing. So, I didn't start the wrestling side of things until a little later. But, if I could have, maybe I would have done a little more. But other than that, honestly, I stumbled upon what I think are probably the most effective, most fulfilling lifestyle paths that anyone could hope for.
That's great.
And I wouldn't change a thing.
Fantastic.
Except maybe I'd just take it a little more seriously sometimes. Sometimes I'd go off and I'd travel overseas, or I'd be off having fun doing this and that. And sometimes I drop certain aspects of the path, and you come back 6 months later, you go, whew, that nearly got me. But so I guess if there was anything, it would be in those early days, especially, just be more consistent.
Now, and also, we haven't mentioned so far, but what you've been teaching me, I've attended a few of your classes, doing a bit of jiu-jitsu. Cameron is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu as well. So that's the wrestling part you talking about.
Yes.
And I watched the YouTube video I found about you competing, and it was not very long ago. How old were you when you?
In jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Well, look, I wanted to compete, and I was 56. And they have masters divisions, so I entered in the 55 and over. But the oldest person they could find was 39, and he was much more experienced than me. So I had fun, and I got beaten, but that's fine. You know, and I guess I live vicariously through my students. So my students compete, and they do well, and that's good for me too. Maybe I'll compete again. I got all those competitive desire genes out of me when I was competing in Kyokushin. Yeah, I think, I get quite competitive on the mat when I'm rolling with guys, and that's enough.
Right. And one more question, really, because 45 Project is all about helping guys over 40 make better health choices, better exercise choices. Would you have an advice for someone over 40 who wants to get back into moving or wants to start moving if they actually haven't moved that much in the last 20, 30 years? Where do they start? What's the best strategy to avoid the injuries you mentioned, that your goal is to stay healthy, to stay injury-free? What is your advice?
It depends on the individual too. I mean, there's no prescription is perfect for everyone. Just like there's no diet is perfect for everyone. There's no spiritual path is perfect for everyone. So some people who have come from a very, very physically active youth, and then they go to uni, they get married, they have a family. They go from one extreme to the other. For them, it can be dangerous because their memory is that I used to be a champion athlete, so now I want to get it back into it, and they go back into a little too hard, too fast. For people who have never been active, well, it's coming the other way. So you kind of look at it. Have you ever been to, in Florence in Italy where Michelangelo's David is?
I have been, yes.
You know the prisoners, those
Yes.
stone statues that are incomplete?
Yep.
Well, it's like that. Some sculptors start with a big block of marble and chip away, and others start with a wire frame and they build on. But the finished product is the same. So some people have to learn how to bring it down.
Yes.
Some people have to learn to bring it up. And the easiest way, I think, honestly, the best way is just start with a single breath. If you're completely sedentary and you want to get started, well, then set your alarm just 5 minutes earlier and you get up and you walk out and you take a single breath. And if you do that consistently for 1 week, you've really achieved something amazing because you're beginning to change habits. And it's all about habits. It's everything you do, doesn't matter whether it's what you say, what you think, what you do, how you act, they're all contributing to a habit. So if you want to change your current habit, then you've got to remember that for 20 years, it's been digging in, and that groove's quite deep. So you're not going to get out of that groove straight away. So what you do is you just start off with a single breath.
One thing.
Yeah.
Not 10, not 20.
No, definitely not 10.
Yeah. Sometimes people just go from Monday, I'm doing this and this, I give up alcohol, I give up sugar, I give up bread, I go to the gym 5 days a week, and then after 2 weeks, it slows down. It's just 3 days now.
You can't, it's consistency is the key.
Yeah.
So I say you got to get over the first 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
If you can be consistent for 4 days, then your next goal is 4 weeks. And if you can be consistent for 4 weeks, then your next goal is 4 months.
Right.
And if you can be consistent for 4 months, you've completely rechanged that groove, that habitual groove. Start off with a single breath. After a few days, single breath, 1 push-up. After a few more days, a couple of breaths. 1 push-up, sit down, close your eyes, another breath. And then you just build on just a little bit at a time, chip away, build on. And that's absolutely more than enough. And then if you can, start to do a little bit of stretching. Because realistically, the thing that you see most that makes someone old is the loss of mobility.
Yep.
As people get old, they get stiff.
Yep.
And what starts their stiffness is their mental stiffness too. They become opinionated. And a lot of these, you look at people who become stiff before their time, they're opinionated and they're very narrow-minded and they have all these crazy, stiff beliefs. So they become very rigid in their
Also
mindset.
irritable, I found. People tend
It's
to
all
get
part of it.
irritable,
Yes,
yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
It's all part of it.
Yeah.
So if the first thing you can do is just learn to just let go of things, and just be more relaxed in your mindset, more flexible with your thinking, then all of a sudden your body lets go as well, and the next thing you know, you can regain the youthfulness simply by changing your mindset, and then you just add on a little bit of stretching. Next thing you know, you're away. It doesn't have to be. It's not the big things that count. It's not the huge events that make the difference. It's the daily, consistent effort, chugging away, a little bit at a time. Fall off the track, doesn't matter. Go back to it. Don't beat yourself up. Doesn't matter. The fact is, life is troubles. I mean, the Buddha says life is suffering. Krishna says the world is an ocean of suffering. Christ says in this world there is
Suffering. Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
They all, you can't get away from it because of the nature of the world. It's a duality. You've got summer, you've got winter. You can't have summer all the time. It doesn't work like that. You can't be happy all the time. You say to people, what do you want to be? I just want to be happy. No, it doesn't work like that because everything balances out. Okay, so if you can just smooth out the magnitude and just learn to balance everything out, take it easy, life is a lot easier. And then you'll find the exercise comes easier, the lifestyle changes, you know, you don't get affected by things so much, and, you know, you don't get angry as easy, and all that stuff.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you for the advice. So you guys listen to Cameron. It starts with one breath. We'll see you next time for another episode of the Fortified Project.
See ya.